Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you here. I think it was, after the concert, it was a tough morning. So thank you all for coming. Today we're going to talk about Salesforce development, how to actually perform development, what kind of programming languages we can use, what kind of tool we can use there. Yeah, basically everything you need to know about the development. Before I start, there is a QR code where you can submit a review, so this is important to understand if we are going good or not. We'll appreciate if you will submit your feedback. All right, let's talk about me a little bit. My name is Volodymyr Radko. I'm from Ukraine, and I'm a Salesforce architect at Noltec. I have 10 years of experience. I have 12 Salesforce certificates. I have 3 kids. And by the way, do you know what is the difference between Salesforce certificates and kids? Basically, it's harder to maintain kids. That's why I have more certificates than kids. And the fact is, I'm living 1 kilometer from airport, but every time I need to travel somewhere, I need to take my car and cross the border, move to other country. That's because of war in Ukraine. But however, the difficult situation gives you a chance to revisit your current problem and your values. So yeah. Let's actually start with our agenda. First of all, we will take a look what is Salesforce from the developer perspective of view, how it is designed and what it's capable for. Then we will take a look for developer capabilities, what you can actually use as a programming languages, as a customization, how you basically can build the app inside of the Salesforce. The second tool, the next topic will be, okay, what kind of tools we can use for building our solutions. So, because knowing the programming language, we need to have the tools to build them. And the last one bit is basically APIs, because this gives us an understanding, okay, how the tools are communicating with Salesforce orgs. So that's what we will cover in API section. All right, let's get started with the Salesforce. So as we know, the Salesforce is a cloud-based platform. What it means for us, it means that our solution hosted somewhere in the cloud, and if we have internet, we have access to it. If we don't have an internet, there is no access to Salesforce. So basically, it's not stored locally on our machine. It is stored like somewhere in the cloud. Salesforce is multi-tenant platform. What it actually means, so you can imagine it as having a house where a lot of people are renting rooms. So basically, all of these rooms have some electricity, water supplyment, internet, air condition, heating, and many, many more things. But at the same time, you can buy your own furniture, you can paint your walls, you can break some walls, you can change the windows. So basically, you can do any kind of, let's say, customizations you like. That's the principle how Salesforce works. It gives you the common infrastructure, the common data model, but then you're able to customize it for your needs. And as we mentioned, this is highly customizable. So basically, you can perform different type of actions in Salesforce. You can customize existing stuff. You can do really amazing things to tailor your solution to your business needs. And of course, Salesforce is not an isolated system. You can integrate it with very large amount of different third-party systems. So basically, you can build a really large ecosystem where the Salesforce will be just the one piece in it. As we are saying that Salesforce is hosted in the cloud, it's important to understand why do we have limits. So basically, we have like the apex limits, the limits per transactions, because it is hosted in the cloud, and we cannot expose unlimited resources to anyone. So that's why we need to limit people, and that's why we have the governor limits, especially in apex or in other transactions. Basically, in Salesforce, there are limits everywhere, so we should be aware of it during our app development. So we need to take a look. As you can see, there are a lot of limits, but that's not a list of all of them. You can have some limits per cloud, per license, per organization, and many, many more things. But that's just to mention that you have a lot of limits here. I think it's the right time to take a look, okay, what kind of developer capabilities Salesforce offers for us. Our work is representation of our capabilities, once Edward Gibbon said. But in our case, I would like to say that our solution is representation of platform capabilities. You're not able to build a video game server with help of Salesforce because it's just not capable of it. But what you can do actually, you can solve your business problems because that's something which is Salesforce capable of. And let's take a look, okay, what kind of capabilities do we have? Those, I would like to mention those four Like that's not any, this list is way more bigger, but I would like to say that those are main points. So first of all, we start with data model, because data model is our core, and this gives us an idea what kind of data structure we will be operating on. So those are big objects, custom metadata, custom settings, basically all the data structure representation. You can think of it as, like to simplify, as a database. So basically this is kind of database where you can store your data and operate with the data. Then we have different amount of settings. So we can set up some session settings, case settings, opportunity settings, and many, many more things. So basically it defines, okay, how the system will behave. Depends if you have checked some options or unchecked them. Then, which is interesting for us developers, is code examples. We can use code languages to customize our solution. It could be either Apex or LWC. It have different representation, and we will talk a little bit later about it. And also, Salesforce offers low-code solutions, which are called flows. Basically, flow is kind of drag-and-drop solution where you're able to point and click and build your solution without, let's say, not really coding. Then let's take a look on Apex. Apex is an object-oriented programming language which Salesforce is using. So with help of Apex, you can customize your solution. So let's say you inject Apex into your current solution, and then you can define what type of behavior will be executed in some certain amount of situations. Similar to programming languages as Java, .NET, we have Apex is represented as classes, like class files, and it also can be represented as triggers, which are binding to our database. So if we're talking about, okay, what can I actually do with Apex? We can do actually many things. We can just, it can act as a controller. It can act as asynchronous processes. We can build the custom REST endpoints. We can predefine behavior for authentication provider. You can use it as a just-in-time user provisioner. You can handle emails with it. You can define the custom app behavior and many, many more things you can do with Apex. So basically, that's a tool which allows you to really customize the behavior of the platform. Then there is a front-end side of this Salesforce development, which is called LWC. Basically, LWC is Lightning Web Components. So this is a modern framework which is aligned to modern web component standard. So it means that if you're transitioning from other languages, from JavaScript language frameworks like React, Angular, Vue.js, and etc., it will be easier for you to pick up because the concepts are the same. But basically, of course, you need to learn the framework, but the concepts are the same, and most of the time you're operating with JavaScript and HTML. This is an open source framework, so you can utilize it for any type of projects you need. And Salesforce is exposing different features like local development. So basically, you're able to perform a local development with help of for LWC. And again, you can do different things with LWC. You basically use it for customizing your UI, to build utility bar, to utilize quick actions, to build model windows, and many, many more things. And it's worth to talk about the flows. As I mentioned, flow is low-code mechanism, which allows you to drag and drop elements and build your solution. Here you can see an example of how flow looks like. Basically, you can see the UI elements, you can see some connections between them, and basically it defines, okay, how your app will be behaving and what type of business problem it will be solving. So as I mentioned, you still are able to connect it, integrate with Apex, with some code, but basically the purpose of it is to reconsider development as with the building blocks rather with like strict coding. There are also different flow types. You can either cover front-end problems, like with the screen flows. Also, you can handle different processes, like with the platform event flows. Or there could be like auto-launch flows, which are dependent on the time. And basically, yeah, you can operate on the records with help of record trigger flows. So if we're comparing code to declarative stuff, I can say that with code you have way more flexibility. You can really customize your behavior. You can utilize different coding practices, calling patterns, some good practices, and etc. You can follow some modern standard and practice. On the other side, let's say you need to maintain the solution. You spend more time on coding because basically you need to code all of this. You need to cover different scenarios, and it's more time consuming rather than drag and drop. On the opposite side, declarative is not require you coding, like really coding. You can drag and drop. You can quickly establish your solution. But on the other side, you're not that flexible as with the code. You're a little bit limited, and of course, you still have some issues with debugging, with performance, and then also governor limits applies to the flows. Give us the tools, and we will finish the job. That I would like what developer will says, and that's Winston Churchill actually said. If we're talking about like the tools which we can utilize for Salesforce development, first of all, if we're talking about code, we mentioned the VS Code with extension. So VS Code is basically a platform where you're able to perform development. An extension allows you to connect to Salesforce and utilize functions which are specific to Salesforce. For example, register, create scratch org, create Apex class, Apex trigger, and many, many more things. So basically, you need the VS Code and the connector. Then you can have different web tools and browser extensions which will help you to operate with your org. So it might help you debugging the code, it might help you to build the query, it helps you with integration for CLI, and many, many more things. Another layer is the languages, which we were discussing previously. Those are frameworks like Aura, LWC, Apex, SOQL query language, and SLDS. Those are applicable for styles, which are Salesforce utilizing. Then we have the Salesforce CLI. Basically, if you're familiar with admin routine, it allows you to perform, to execute some commands from the command line, and it will perform your tasks. Basically, this is a great tool for automation because you can write some automation script with help of CLI, and you can interact your org directly from your computer and your command line. And of course, as development process requires some code control, source control, we can use different types like GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab. And then, of course, if we're talking about the development process and CI/CD, then we can utilize different things like Jenkins, Circle CI, AutoRabbit, and many more other things. So, but let's say, to understand how do we perform development, we should think about Salesforce as a metadata. Everything you can see in Salesforce, like different layouts, objects, classes, LWC component settings, all of this is represented as a metadata. So you can think about Salesforce as a metadata universe. So what you're basically doing while you're developing, you are retrieving all the metadata files. You modify metadata files and you deploy them back to Salesforce. That's basically how the development happening. And that's why you are operating on the metadata locally. This is how the Salesforce extension for Visual Studio Code looks like. Basically, as I mentioned, you are using the VS Code capabilities, but in addition to it, extension allows you to perform Salesforce-specific action, like create different files, deploy your changes, retrieve changes, authorize user, like the connection to the org, and many, many other things. Yeah, so that's basically you utilize power of VS Code and with extension. Another one which we were mentioning is Salesforce CLI. Basically, this is the command line tool which allows you to perform all of the operations, like a different amount of operations from your console. As I mentioned, it is extremely useful for admins and when you would like to make automations in terms of deployment, code checking, and other things. So the Salesforce CLI is the right tool if you're really familiar with the console tools, and then you can utilize it to perform different tasks. All right, so we were talking about the different tools, but it is important to understand, okay, how we are actually making the change, bringing the changes to Salesforce, because there is no magic, and Salesforce, like all of these tools, they are utilized APIs which Salesforce exposes. So as we talking about previously talking about metadata universe, so all the connections are happening through metadata API. Basically, when you change all of the metadata, when you save something in your VS Code, it basically performs a deployment to Salesforce. So basically, it identifies which files need to be deployed, then the package is created and package is deployed to Salesforce. That's how metadata API works. But also, you can see here the tooling API. So the purpose of tooling API is to basically run some additional processes. Let's say you would like to run the test classes. You would like to run anonymous Apex. So that's basically where you can utilize tooling API for some processes which are happening in Salesforce or around the Salesforce. And I think it's important to know that from time to time, we as developers operating not only with metadata, but actually with the data. So sometimes it is important to upload the big amount of data to our production org, or we need to set up the test data to our Scratch orgs or sandboxes. Then we are working with APIs which are dedicated to data. So here, as you can see, there are 3 main APIs which are operating with data in Salesforce. Those are REST API, Bulk API, and SOAP API. So all of them have their own limits. And if you consider small amount of data, you can consider REST or SOAP API. If you're thinking about uploading like thousands of records, then the Bulk API is your tool, but then you need to know actually how it's worked, because the principle of working is a little bit different than the REST API. You don't get immediately the result, so basically your records will be processed asynchronously. That's important to understand. And as a summary, I would like to say that Salesforce exposes you a huge amount of tools and a huge amount of capabilities, but it is our responsibility to understand, okay, what kind of tools we're choosing and how to use them correctly. Because in my opinion, there are no bad tools, but some of the tools might not be used on their purpose. So if you're trying to nail the nuts, you're not using the microscope, you're just using hammer. So the same might be here. So if you would like to build something complex, let's say my personal recommendation, do not use the simple tools. If you know that there will be a complexity, use something which gives you the flexibility. So comparing, let's say, some flows, like declarative tools in coding, I would rather choose the coding one for a complex solution. But if you know that there should be something simple, which you can achieve in a short amount of time, then of course you should pick up tools which allow you to do this. In this case, those are flows. Here is